Yeah, just it's fine, yeah. So we're just waiting on Mallory.
How's it going? Good to see you.
Good job. Everything is fabulous. You worked hard.
Oh, okay. Good to go. Harry, how's it going?
Great, great. Are you having fun, Kathy?
Okay, good.
I have one. Okay, wait for Mallory. She's here. Y'all sit down. We'll, hey, Catherine, I want you to see if Mallory. We're missing one. Oh, she's right there. Go ahead and start.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Merrick, and I'm thrilled to be able to moderate this panel on family offices. My understanding of the whole concept of mission is that corporations have a group of stakeholders, and a mission focus is where you elevate the needs and wants of the various stakeholder groups beyond sort of the traditional metrics of just thinking of shareholders first, and all done for the common good. So that's my idea of what this conference is about in general, is talking about that concept through various different manifestations. Family offices, and just as a quick tutorial, tend to exist because once upon a time there was a family-owned and run business. And either that company has sold or it's produced a lot of profits or cash flow over the years, and the family wants to set up an entity to control those assets, typically to invest in a passive way, similar to what an endowment or pension fund would do, although there's all sorts of different iterations. The purpose of family offices, kind of by design, by construction, are to serve the needs of the family. So that when we talk about family offices and how they're constituted, they're almost structured not really to be very well aligned with the mission purpose. If you think about an operating business that has lots of consumers, you can think about the complementary nature of having a mission focus and still serving the shareholders and having that sort of perspective. But when you think about family office, by design, it's all about the family. The title, All in the Family, it's all about the family. So what we want to discuss over this next 45 minutes or so is we have 4 people that are all part of various family offices. And what we want to talk about is what they have done, what the families have done, whether it's the family that made the wealth, they're just starting the family office right now, or it's multi-generational. What have they done? Because they had to do something contrary to the nature of a family office in order to have a mission focus. So we want to explore all that for a while, and we're real thrilled to have with us today Mallory Muse, Harry Hawks, Joe O'Brien, and Kris Davis. So what I would ask each of the four of you is a very short summary of your particular family office or the family that you affiliate with, and then what things have been done either now or in the past to help create or structure your family office so it could have a mission focus. Mallory, I'll let you go first.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. I'm so excited that you're interested in this topic, or if you're here by mistake, thank you anyway. It's good to see you as well. So I have the great privilege of being the Vice President of Community Development at the Muse Family Foundation. So we do have the family office, started by John and Lynn Muse. John is a private equity professional, Hicks Muse Tate First, big PE firm in the 80s, which has since evolved into HM Capital and now Kainos. And about 20 years ago, the family established the Muse Family Foundation to create opportunities in education in the city of Dallas. As Gen 2 has come up, that mission has since evolved to access to opportunity and economic mobility in the city of Dallas. And we've gotten very place-based with our efforts in 75210, 75215, the South Dallas area.
My name is Harry Hawks. Oh, sorry. I was already instructed. Hi, I'm Harry Hawks. Also, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate the interest in the subject. I think I was invited to participate in this because over the years, this is public information, I did work with or for the Hearst family, the Tisch family, and the Pulitzer family, and a few others that weren't public information. I probably will bring a few stories. It's once again public information, so I'm not sharing any secrets, but you know, you were talking about the family business. The family business for the Hearst Corporation was founded in 1887, and so as you can imagine, there have been a lot of generations, a lot of you know, wars and recessions and Republicans and Democrats and vegetarians in the White House, and so it's been you know, a real journey to manage the business in such a way that the people who were managing the business had a generational view just as much as the trustees of the William Randolph Hearst Trust estate. By the way, he passed in 1951 and had the foresight to create a model that I think is really pretty special. The company is absolutely thriving. It's reinvented itself many, many times. And today, some of the biggest assets in the company are financial services and healthcare. And this is, you know, a business that started as a newspaper company. So I'll, you know, kind of, you know, pause there because that's the setup, and I'll expand on some of the ideas along the way.
Thank you, Harry. Thanks, Nick, for including me on the panel. I'm Joe O'Brien, as Nick said, and thank you to Michael Moe and GSV for putting this conference together. It's you know, for me, it's the first time I've ever attended one that was a conference so focused on mission in all of its forms for different types of enterprises and organizations. I'm the president and CEO of AG Hill Partners. AG Hill Partners is a family office for Al Hill Jr. and his daughters, Elisa Summers and Heather Washburn, and their husbands and children. The family, it was a family-owned business, Hunt Petroleum, which was part of the broader Hunt family that most of you from Dallas know. And the Hunt Petroleum was sold in 2008, and the family has since been involved with diversifying their investments as well as you know, serving the needs of the family. You know, one of the diversification efforts was the purchase of Highland Park Village in 2009. So many of you know the shopping center, you know, the Highland Park Village, and that has since on its own grown into becoming an operating business. So we're kind of an interesting family office in that we've sort of sprouted a second operating business as we've expanded luxury retail into other places beyond Dallas. I do think, Nick, you, I think, pointed out that, you know, family offices are first and foremost there to serve the family, and that involves a lot of different elements in terms of how you serve a family, whether that be personal, whether that be legal, whether that be financial. We all think about investing a lot too, and that's a big part of it. I think we use a term a lot it's not unique to family offices, but you all hear this, which is stewards of capital. And I think most family offices, particularly as they become multi-generational, start to think about the mission of being a steward of capital to pass on to future generations. And you hear different analogies, like it's a stream of running water, and each generation just takes a sip from the stream and passes that along. I think there's an even broader sense of what that means to be a steward of capital, because we continue to live in a capitalist society in our country. And so I think we all have to think about what our role is as, and this is true of everybody in this room, by the way, it's not just family offices. We all have to think about what is our role as a steward of capital in a capitalist society. How do we apply that resource to its highest and best use? And does that application align with the family's values? We can elaborate on that more as we go on.
Hi, I'm Kris Davis. In our prep call, we very quickly realized that each one of us operate very differently and in sort of different capacities. A family office has a pretty broad definition. So I had the unique opportunity of watching my dad, who's Ray Davis. He was a founding partner of Energy Transfer and a partner with the Texas Rangers, create his own family office. And he's 81 and works harder than anybody I know except my cook. And so I've just had such a great opportunity to watch him. And so I just realized that I didn't want to necessarily sit under a family office and just watch it. I wanted to do something on my own. So about a decade ago, Mike and I met. We spent about a year having lunch together every single week and just seeing if we were in alignment with our beliefs, because I really wanted to create something that whatever we did, it was profit driven. So it's not necessarily a not-for-profit, but it is mission driven. Are we making a difference? Are we having an impact on the community? And are we doing good? And so that's my story.
Great. And just briefly, for me, I run the family office for Kenny and Lisa Trout, and many of you know who they are here in Dallas. And one of the things, when I think about them and mission, they've been very generous financially with all sorts of causes. But one of the things that I think about with them is the power of showing up. The Trouts built what once upon a time was a gymnasium for their kids, and it sort of turned into basically a meeting hall. And the number of things that they've hosted over the years, really utilizing their gift of generosity and service, has really been amazing for me to see. In addition, Kenny, who we just love, many of us who work for him are here today, he gives out $100 bills to almost anyone in the service sector. In fact, a few of us have been mistaken for being in the service sector at times and received those $100 bills. And it's just, that's his way of saying, I recognize you, even though, you know, on the totem pole of who's doing what. And so there's all sorts of ways I think about, like a Christmas tree. You know, probably most people here decorate a Christmas tree, but the way that you decorate it is very different. Everyone would have its own difference. We are one company, we have Swanda, has these aircraft engine ornaments, which we thought was really cool. So there's all sorts of different ways of doing that. So I guess my question to the group is, how do you, within the concept of a family, within multi-generations, narrow in on what is mission to all of you? And I sort of throw that up as an air ball for the first one to grab it.
I'll speak if
Okay.
you'd like, Nick. I think part of what your question implies is, how do you develop good governance when you have multiple family members who may or may not have completely aligned interests? And I think that's really important for the continuity of these kinds of organizations, is getting the governance right as to who has what decision-making rights for shared resources and assets. We recently went through an exercise where Al Hill Jr. Passed away in 2017 and left substantial assets for a foundation. So this is basically a brand new foundation from scratch. And his two daughters and I serve as the directors, and we went through an exercise. It probably took us close to a year to work through with the help of a philanthropic advisor. First of all, what's the name? What should we call it? What's the mission? How do we define the mission? And that took probably multiple meetings over the course of 6 months. And then once that was established, got into the governance around grant-making policy, who gets to decide where the grants go every year, investment policy, and other typical, business policies. In our case, Nick, maybe it was easier than others because there were really two family members, primarily involved, and there was an existing preset sense of family values through a lot of philanthropy that had happened for generations before. But the exercise itself of putting that in writing, I just can't even emphasize enough how important that is. And we end up with one sentence, but you wouldn't think it would take 6 months to write one sentence, but it basically does, to do it well and to make sure that it's aligned with what everybody believes and has as an intent.
I'd love to piggyback on that. When we created the Happy Davis Foundation, we had a similar process. It took over a year to really figure out what is our mission. And something that Mr. Kaplan said yesterday that really stuck with me was basically, and this is a paraphrase, but put your money where your mouth is, find your passion, and go get your hands dirty. And I think that that's something that for us in our family, it's important for, my children and my children's children, that I want to teach them that we're not just here writing checks, which is, by the way, very important. We all need all of us to write checks and write checks. But we also, I think the more passionate we are about a cause, when our heart is in it, it shows.
At the Hearst Corporation, I'm now retired, but when I left, there were 63 beneficiaries of the trust. And so, as you can imagine, for a 135-year-old family business, values evolve over time. And so, the way people thought in 1887 is not the way they think today. So trying to stay relevant, stay current, but stick with the mission. Once again, it is a dual bottom line, if you will. There is a long-term investment horizon for the family and the family business, but which is a delight. Having been in 2 public companies, managing quarterly earnings was terrible. But there's no, forgiveness of creating value for the company and for the family and the future generations, but it's just not managing monthly or quarterly results. What has really filtered through the company, every operating unit company. When I left, we had 120 different business units operating in 118 countries. And every business had a similar business model, that is, get involved in your local community. Being a good corporate citizen was good for business. We were able to, frankly, have premium pricing of our products and services because people wanted to be associated with us. We wound up being a destination employer. People wanted to work for us. And the values were imparted throughout every operating unit, every business, and every executive. It frankly, like I said, was good for business. It also gave the company the opportunity, when it's financially successful, to support scholarships, to support community service, promote volunteerism, and to give back to the community in a whole bunch of different ways. This is, by the way, separate and apart, and in addition to the work of the foundation. William Randolph Hearst created the Hearst Foundation in 1946. The Tax Reform Act of 1969, which affected everybody, basically moved the the foundation outside of the corporation as a standalone entity, and it came with, at that point in time, once again, this is 1969, $137 million of assets. Since then, since 1969, the foundation has made 22,200 grants totaling $1.4 billion, and there's still $1.3 billion assets left in the trust. So the trust has been managed like the business. It's self-sustaining. It's growing very nicely. If you give away you start with 137, give away 1.4 and you have 1.3 left, you know, you're managing your investments reasonably well. And but that's the way the company's run too. So it's been you know, a real privilege, but it's also, you know, a really nice place to work. I loved it, and because we proved every single day you can be one of the good guys and succeed.
Mallory, how do you all figure out where you're going to focus?
So it's an interesting question. So, I mean, historically, the foundation has been sort of a passive grant maker in the education space. And then things got interesting when we decided to look at things through a business lens like you're talking about. And we started to bring to bear some of the assets that the family office had to offer. So, for example, you know, we have the chair of the board is a private equity professional who's really laser focused on market-based solutions to some of the more intractable social issues that we're dealing with in our city. I'm an attorney by background. We hired a financial analyst at the foundation. We lean heavily on the chief investment officer at the family office side. And we start to think about not just the 5% payout, right? The private foundation is required to give away 5% of its corpus every year in grants, but how do we really optimize the other 95% to try and achieve some of our goals as a foundation? And so we had this retreat maybe 5-6 years ago with the board, which is my in-laws and their 5 children and me. And there was this article from Harvard Business Review called Audacious Philanthropy that we all kind of read through and discussed. And in that article, they talk a lot about how do you shift the focus from the donor to the doer, which is so important and a big part of what drives what we do, take the ego out of giving. But and really find those people on the ground who are doing this work day in and day out and doing it well and figuring out where they see opportunities and how we can leverage our resources to best support them. But also, you know, how we can think about more sustainable solutions to these issues that we're all dealing with. What that article calls catalytic philanthropy. Philanthropists right now, you know, they don't want to just fund food pantries and homeless shelters. They want to end hunger and they want to end homelessness. And so we've started thinking along those lines as well. What are those systemic level opportunities for us to invest in, to use that 95% to invest in? And when we make our return, let's spit it back out into these communities. And so in the housing space, which is where I primarily focus, we make low interest loans and below market equity investments in workforce and affordable housing. And so all of that's to say the shift has been really from passive grant making into impact investing, really in the affordable housing space.
So let's do the time capsule thing. Either Harry, you can go back 4 or 5 generations. The rest of us can move forward or whatever. What things that you might observe, or do you think the benefactors way back when, or to the rest of us, we move forward several generations, and you're able to see how the people that are stewarding the money then, what things would you want to see that would make you feel like that's great? They're still continuing the flame. And then what would be the things that you would want to say, those are yellow lights, or something's gone off course?
Well, the Hearst Corporation, once again, you know, been around for 135 years. Well, sorry. Been around for 135 years. You know, some businesses failed along the way, and there was there is.
But I mean with the mission focus, whether it's in the operating business or in giving, in that context.
Well, let me pick up where Mallory was going. You know, the foundation doesn't like to make one-off grants. They like to get involved in a program where they can support an effort in education or healthcare or keeping families together, or you know, whatever the focus is. But something they can do year after year after year and achieve an impact, achieve results, measurable results, and that's I think something that's been, you know, with the Hearst family and the Hearst Corporation for actually a number of years. That culture, that value, that sort of mission orientation has survived generations.
And the rest of you looking forward, what would you want to see?
Well, Mallory, I love what you said about what you guys are doing, because what I'm seeing throughout the world of nonprofits is a real shift in focus and how they run the business and to be more self-sustainable. So just for instance, I sit on a charity called Wine to Water, and we sort of fell into a revenue stream. So they do emergency water filters throughout the world, and that's one of the things we do. But they needed to be assembled, and so they had a small company in their little town that decided to do like a team building thing, and then suddenly a bigger company found out about it, and they decided that they could do it. So they were actually just kind of, it was free labor or volunteer labor. And then we realized, oh, these companies would pay us to do that as a team building thing. And so now we have about a $2 million top line for just that one item. And it's growing, and that's with zero marketing. It's all word of mouth. And so there's, where in these nonprofits can they come in and self-sustain? And so as a foundation, what we love to see is to go in and put different charities together and have some synergy, like a International Justice Mission partnered with Buckner down in Guatemala. And the result was just unbelievable growth, and the help that it did. They were both doing such great work in the world, but this was a real game changer for both of these nonprofits. So I think that it's also really not getting stuck in any one thing and how it's always been done, but to really stay open to change, and stay open to vision.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I was going to say, particularly as it relates to the foundations, oftentimes the benefactor, we all know the expression, you can't rule from the grave, you can't, it's almost like a constitutional setup, right? And so I think what Kris is saying, you as the benefactor, and when these get set up, you have to acknowledge that you won't necessarily be here to make every decision for these future generations. I mean, William Randolph Hearst is no longer with us, and yet his descendants are making these decisions now. So getting that constitutional rules set up properly, I think, is important, because most benefactors that I know on these sort of foundations, among other things, one of their objectives is to give the family something that binds them. And a foundation is an extraordinarily powerful tool for binding your future generations together. And if your question was what would be a disappointment, it would be to find out that tool actually drove them apart. And so the way to ensure against that, I think, is with good constitutional foundation of governance and rules about who gets to nominate to the board of directors, and then how are the grants made, and who has to approve the grants, and setting a mission, knowing that mission also needs to endure generationally, but have enough flexibility in it to face whatever the next century looks like.
I would just add that family offices can always bring money to the table. There's no one that talks to us that says they want something from us. They may want money and something else, but money's always the bedrock of it. And one of the things that I have just gained a lot from is the corresponding engagement. What can I learn? What can we learn as a family office from those people that are out there that we're giving money to? And really the big theme is kind of showing up. So just as a quick side, my mother passed away a couple months ago, and Joe's been a good friend for a long time, and he came over and said, my dad always taught me when someone dies, you show up and you shine their shoes. Because there's those pair of shoes you don't wear very often that you're going to wear to the funeral, and to have a friend come over and shine those shoes. And it was just a fun thing to say during a time of mourning, but it really hit me hard, because engagement and showing up, I think, are values that really sustain itself over time. And I think about the Trout family, I think about my family, And what I would be disappointed in is to go 3, 4 generations down where there's checks being written, or I guess there's probably some, you blink your eyes and some money goes, whatever the technology will be at that time. Or I'll think I might do it. AI will do something or whatever, but it would be just money. There would be no engagement because in the process you lose something. I was part of 2 startup companies, and that the people that made the most amount of money, what they both say, everyone says across the board, is that time when we're all together, yelling, screaming, loving on each other, taking risks, that whole energy from that is what I most miss when I made my wealth, because then I have my stockbroker, my builder, my pilot, my pool guy, my landscaper, whatever. And those are people telling me what a handsome and powerful man I am, which I'm neither. And so the whole idea of engagement, and as you talked about the water flowing through the generations, to me, external engagement, not just money, is, I think, one of the optimal ways to keep that water flowing.
One of the things I find most inspiring, obviously everybody alive in the Hearst family today, wasn't around to build the business in the beginning, and so kind of, grew up in an already established business. Your experience and Mr. Muse and everybody else who's built businesses, that's inspirational. I mentioned in my opening remarks that I also worked with and for the Tisch family. One of the things that I found quite inspirational about them, they are Ashkenazi Jews from Ukraine, and if you're familiar with the history, that was a group of people who did very, very poorly in the Holocaust, and they came to the United States, built the Lowe's Corporation, which is a diversified conglomerate, become incredibly affluent, but have taken their life experience and their wealth and turned it into good. They are huge supporters of education. By the way, the Cornell Tech campus on Roosevelt Island in New York is largely because of Andrew Tisch. But they do that kind of thing below the radar. They help everywhere they turn, and I find that totally inspirational. By the way, a friend of mine is across the hall, Dr. Stephen Shia. He's being interviewed by Michael Moe in a fireside chat. Now, you guys don't leave, so stay here. But his family are Iraqi Christians. And so they immigrated to America to avoid persecution in Iraq. And family set up a business. They have realized the American dream. They have become quite wealthy, built a really big business. And Stephen is the quintessential pay it forward kind of guy. And so he has dedicated his life to literally going around the world, trying to make the world a better place, and using his wealth as a way to promote economic development in the Middle East and a bunch of other places. And in the process, the Vatican sort of, recognizes his work. The UN. I haven't quite figured this one out, but he's also been honored by the FBI. That one, there's a story in there somewhere. But the point of just sharing, Dr. Shia's experience, the guy across the hall, and the Tisch family experience, they had a really rough beginning, but it was realizing the American dream and being hugely successful, and then using that good fortune and their values to, if you will, pay it back.
Anyone else want to comment on something that they kind of learn or values from being externally engaged?
I think the best way to pass that along, you were talking about the stream, but the best way to pass that along is by example. It has, right? Your children see you engage, and then your grandchildren see you engage and see their parents engage, and so on down the line. And I think that's what it means to have values as a family, and I think that's what it means to have a culture as an organization, that people begin to understand what the norms of behavior are, and those norms might include engagement.
Yeah, I would just echo what you said earlier in terms of engagement and getting your hands dirty. When I started at the foundation, that was a value, is we're going to dig in where we can dig in. So we're going to look at financials. We're going to take board seats. We're going to figure out how to help these nonprofits achieve sustainability. And a part of me was like, oh, this is a lot of work. But it was so worth it in the end, because when you do start to see these outcomes, and when you spend all of your time on the ground with these groups who are doing the work, and you're seeing them achieve these milestones day in and day out, and you're benchmarking against the baselines, like it's pretty exciting. So I would love to see future generations not just be passive grant makers, but be actively involved, like you said.
Kris, I saw you nodding excessively.
That was really good. Yeah, I agree.
What about the whole process of saying yes and no? I find that the most repeated task I do as running a family office is to say the word no. And so maybe talk about that, because that's kind of, the plumbing system and in the weeds of running a family office. And then so trying to pursue a mission focus. Anyone have any unique insight on how you say yes or no well?
Well, that is a really hard one. It's really hard for me because I want to say yes to everybody, because often and almost all the time it really is a very worthy nonprofit doing really great work. But I think one way that helps that is to do what we talked about earlier, and that's really to have a focus. What is your passion? So if your focus is healthcare and education, and if it's outside of that scope, it's going to tend to be a no. Doesn't mean you can't follow your heart sometimes and still make a grant, but that helps when you really do have that focus.
Mallory?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I remember, we've underwritten hundreds of deals in this space before we started making investments. And I remember saying to John Muse, if we keep saying no, are people just going to turn their backs on us? And he was like, Mallory, that's not how you approach this. Like, you have to be smart about these investments. And he was right. And ultimately, it was the right call, but saying no is so hard. But to your point, it helps you stay focused and mission aligned, and helps you kind of achieve those goals that you set out for yourself in the beginning. So it's important. It's hard, but it's important.
Does anyone have anything that their family office does that no one here would guess, like, there's just no way you do that? I know back in our family office, we used to have a bunch of stuffed wild animals that someone had in one part, and there was kind of a talking piece. But is there anything from anyone's family office that people would find interesting?
We're super boring.
Boring?
Nothing as exotic as the menagerie of animals you had in your office, and I do recall the crocodile that was in your office, as well as other trophies.
Yes.
I'm going to have to stay PG rated because,
Yeah.
it's something that you wouldn't know. But the one thing back about the Hearst family, many of you have probably heard, or maybe perhaps even been there, the Hearst Castle in San Simeon. William Randolph Hearst was really wealthy when the world was broke. And so if you go there, it's think of the Vanderbilt house and something like that. It's a family museum, has over 1 million visitors a year. But the stuff that's on display is fantastic. He went all over the world, and after the Depression, and just bought antiquities and royal families in Europe who were broke and destitute, and he bought really cool stuff from them, and that's what's there at the castle. But the thing that isn't quite known is he also owned 18 miles of California coastline, and for dedicating all of it to conservancy, he got $200 million from the state of California. So that was. It was a win-win for everybody, because now there's this completely undeveloped view of 18 miles of coastline.
Mallory, anything you want to add?
Nope.
Okay, all right. Michael told me to try to get it near edgy, I think was his word. So, does anyone
Trying to stay married.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? Yes.
Yes, and part of. By the way, Andrew Tisch also wrote a book. It's called Journeys. And by the way, I wouldn't let him give me one. I actually bought my own copy on Amazon for $29.95. So he signed it for me. But it's a book about the positive impact that immigrants have had on America. And there's, I don't know, 80 or 90 different stories in there. And by the way, one of the stories is about an Uber driver. So it's not everybody's a billionaire that's, having buildings named after him at Cornell. It's like, who has come here who has, really made a difference. And so it's a wonderful, uplifting book about people from all over the place. And by the way, I don't look the part, but I'm actually part Guatemalan, so I, kind of grew up in that multicultural sort of background. But it was a fascinating read, the book Journeys, to just kind of be exposed to people from all over the world. Now, but it also tells you, the world's a lot smaller than you think. And I grew up in New Orleans, which is kind of a multicultural kind of place. But when I first moved to New York to work at Hearst, frankly, I loved it. I was oftentimes in an elevator where I was the only one speaking English, and it was just like, well, this is interesting. And I'm not Jewish, but I went to the 70-year history of the state of Israel, at the UN. And I thought that was just fascinating. And so it's the world's in a, other than, of course, the conflict in Ukraine, but the world's, I think, a better place than many of us think.
I think that families that generate wealth through this amazing system we have here do have an obligation to share that wealth, with others. It gets very confusing and very conflict-laden when you get into the details of kind of how, when, where, what, for what reason, et cetera. But I think that meetings like this, get-togethers like this, where there can be a good forum for people to kind of really identify who is my neighbor and what does that mean? What is being a neighbor all about? When you bring wealth to the table, it's something I know that we all earnestly, and along with our teams, think about all the time. And sometimes people think about it with political manifestations. Sometimes they may feel strongly about environmental, but we're all aware of what our needs are here in our community. I think that we can rally around a few, like education, poverty, and those are things I think that everyone feels strongly about. But any kind of final thoughts on how a family office should think about the concept of who is my neighbor?
I'll answer from the point of view, I'm on the board of I'm from Louisiana. I went to LSU. I'm on the board of the LSU Foundation. Louisiana, as you know, is typically at the top of the bad list and the bottom of the good list. It's a poor state, and number one in cancer and diabetes, and last in education. We just completed a $1.5 billion campaign 3 years early. What was the difference this time? Because prior campaigns weren't that successful. It was inspiring people that this time we could really make a difference. We had recruited a new president, William Tate is his name, Dr. William Tate. And LSU was founded in 1860. He's the first African-American to be president of the university. But he's got ideas and energy and vision to make the entire state a better place, to make LSU a better place. And it was wildly successful, and we wound up in the process receiving hundreds of millions of dollars of grant monies as well. The point of the story is that inspiration can get people to take action.
And I think Mallory hit on it earlier too, and she said getting our ego out of our giving. So in the parable of the Good Samaritan, it wasn't the shiny, nice-looking person that the Good Samaritan helped. It was the broken.
So I will say that I think I think family offices, I'll try and be really brief because this is a big topic, but I do think family offices are sort of uniquely positioned to, yes, run the operating businesses, make their investments, make their returns, but also strive for social impact. And I say this because, you know, we have patient capital and longer time horizons. So we tend to be smaller so people can make decisions more quickly. We have social capital, which is so important when it comes to helping others achieve economic mobility. Social capital, according to economist Ross Chetty, is the #1 determinant of economic mobility. We have networks. We can convene the public sector, the private sector, the philanthropic sector. We can do things like this to try and address some of these really difficult societal issues in our city. And I'll just make a plug for housing. If anybody's interested in housing, I mean, we are short 33,000 affordable units in just the city of Dallas alone. And if we don't intervene today, that number is going to jump to 84,000 units by 2030. We know that 6 out of 10 families in the city are housing cost burden. They can't afford their rent or they can't afford their mortgage. So I think that, you know, people in this room, we're all uniquely positioned to try and address these issues and address them using market-based solutions where we're helping people scale and be sustainable long-term in this space. So.
I referenced our foundation and working for 6 months to develop a mission statement. And within the mission statement, it says that we're to honor God through the family's values by providing for those in need and for our communities. So I think that answers how we think about who our neighbor is, Nick. We tend to be more local in how we think about that as opposed to global. And there's nothing wrong with being globally philanthropic at all. But we tend to think about our neighbor as those in need, particularly within our, you know, closest community. And that was really a reflection of a family value. That was Al Hill during his lifetime was an incredibly philanthropic man, and his sister Lyda Hill even more so. She takes, you know, a direction with science and other areas. Al was always very laser focused on things that were local, right here in thinking about neighbors.
Great. Yeah, one final question. We're down to 2 minutes. We're going to have one person answer that. Mallory, you want to take that?
Yes, I can be brief and you can jump in real quick. So yes, we look at the left-hand side of the balance sheet and you can make what are called program-related investments. And if they're below market returns, then they count against your 5% payout requirement. Or you can make what are called mission-related investments out of that 95% out of your corpus. And those can have that double bottom line. They don't necessarily count against the 5% requirement, but they have the double bottom line, and you can make market rate returns plus. And I'll talk to you about this all day long.
Right. Okay, so Mallory, Harry, Joe, Kris, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for sitting. It's a great audience.